Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. And welcome to episode 171, Use the Rule of Fives to Stay Focused. In this particular episode, I want to talk about a strategy I learned from looking at a resource that I use. And I mention all the time that we partner with the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. And one of the things that I like about this organization is they don't just put on webinars and workshops and all that, but they actually produce materials, and they do it at a pretty low cost. So, for example, the strategy I'm going to talk about today is coming out of a book. I got a little show and tell here. If you're audio only, I'm holding up a book called Guide to Making Time to Write. And it basically has 100 productivity strategies from the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. This particular book is on sale on their website for $9.95, but there are so many things in it. And if you get a membership, I believe you might be able to get a discount. You get some other perks with it. So I will put our discount code for that organization in our show notes, and you can actually get, I believe, $10 off of joining the organization if you use our code. But why I want to talk about today, so even if you're like, I don't want another membership, I don't want to join, I just want a productivity tip today, I do want to talk about the rule of fives, because this is something I had not thought about, and I haven't seen anybody capture. And what this person does, it's a big contribution in this book of productivity tips from tons of productivity experts, people that focus a lot on time management, working through textbooks, working through academic articles, and so on. So the book's great. I find something new in it all the time. But this particular strategy talked about 5 different things that you can do and in a rule of fives. That's why it's called rule of fives. And so some of the strategies that are suggested there are, for example, do something for 5 minutes a day to move your writing forward. So as noted on earlier episodes of this podcast, I'm not a giant fan of telling everybody they need to write every day. There's a lot of different ways to be an academic writer. And for some people, the pressure and no break is not welcoming to them, but other people, quite frankly, don't have the schedules that could support writing every day. However, I kind of like the idea of just doing anything with your writing for 5 minutes a day. And they give lots of examples on there. It could be looking for one more source that you might need for your literature review, or it could be tweaking one sentence. It could be very small tasks to move you forward. And this got me thinking about the days that I don't do any writing. Could I find 5 minutes to do one little thing? And they give you a lot of suggestions in there. I think I probably could. So I like that idea of sort of like these micro writing sessions or micro productivity sessions. I might make a list. Actually, I'm going to make a note to myself right now because that just came to me. But I might make a micro productivity list of different things and come back to you in a later episode with it. But I thought that was a pretty decent strategy, because it doesn't even have to be writing related. It's just anything you want to do on your writing project, as long as you're doing something with it 5 minutes a day. And this could be in addition to a standard writing session, or it could be something that's all you're doing with your writing. So I liked that. There were some other things in there, like listing 5 outcomes that you want to get from producing this particular piece of writing. If you're not clear about those in your head, I don't think that's a bad idea. I've actually used this with one of my projects. I've mentioned, I don't even remember what episode that was in, but I know I talked about yucky writing projects. I still have one left, but I've pretty much cleared them all out, or just said, I'm not going to do them. I don't care that I'm halfway through it. I'm just not going to do it. I don't want to do it. I've quit a couple projects before. But yes, so one of the things I really liked about this was thinking through what are 5 reasons I want, or 5 outcomes I want to get once I produce this publication. So in this case, I'm working on an article. I've got one last article that's sort of half finished. I'm not super excited about it anymore. I don't know. I mean, I know I need to finish it. Many of us have those kinds of projects left. So for me, I know listing out 5 outcomes probably will be pretty helpful for me to just know, here's why I need to do it. You just got to do it. So that's something that I know that it was helpful, top of mind. So there were other things in this rule of fives. I'm not going to talk about all of them on here, but here's the one that I was really, really excited about. There was a note in there about taking 5 minutes a day to synthesize your writing project, meaning write some kind of like summary paragraph about the project that you're working on. If you had to explain it to somebody, how could you summarize your project? I really like this idea. And that got me thinking about a number of different things. So just even starting a writing session, this could be one way to get into a writing session. We've talked about how to, open up a writing session and get some writing going. I'll make sure I link to that episode because we've talked about opening and closing writing sessions a couple episodes back. But I love this idea of coming to a writing session, and before you do anything else, you could even do it in like a clean Microsoft Word, or if you like Google, or I like using Penzu. I could totally see a scenario where I synthesize what my project is in a couple of sentences for 5 minutes. And I do that every day. And for me, envisioning how this is going to happen is I would do it in a Penzu note. I talked about that. It's kind of like an online notebook. I've talked about Penzu hundreds of times. Check out our episodes on Penzu. You can look at it in our YouTube channel if you want to see why I like it. But for me, I would make a note that has all of those times I've synthesized my project, because all those little bitty paragraphs of synthesis are great. My guess is probably as you do it every day, you've kind of refined your thinking a little bit. You might have said something a little bit better in sentence 2 than you said the day before. I could see that you could actually use these in different parts of your project because they're worded differently. You might have one coming near the end where you have to kind of summarize what it is that you're doing. You might have one more at the beginning. But also think of how great this would be. That's great content for an abstract. That's great content for a conference proposal if you're going to talk about that subject. You might use it on LinkedIn to share your work. So the more I started thinking about this, I thought you could get a lot of mileage out of those synthesis paragraphs. And the other part of it is that the recommendation in Making Time to Write, showing it on screen again, but the recommendation to do it, it got me thinking that you don't have to just do this with your overall argument for your project. It could be for just a chapter, it could be for just a section. So for example, I might write a synthesis of my literature review section in an article that kind of sums up what are all the themes, ties them all together. For me, those are the paragraphs I hate to write the most. Hands down, a literature review is never my favorite section to write ever in an article. I know a lot of people really love them because they don't have to work with their own ideas. I am completely the opposite in that I hate writing about other sources. I just kind of slog through it, get them in, and then to me, get to like the cool stuff. But for me, synthesizing a literature review, if I just look at that section, let's say it's in an article and the literature review takes 7 pages out of 22 or 23, for me, that's really helpful to kind of take a couple minutes each day. Maybe I devote 1 week to just working on the literature review, and I spend time synthesizing the literature review by writing a paragraph that sums up what it's about. So remember, when we're synthesizing, we're bringing together all the different threads of the different ideas. We're pulling different pieces together to create some kind of coherent message. So I loved that strategy. I thought it was really cool, and I could see a good use for it every day. So remember how I talked about the other strategy in this rule of fives is, spending 5 minutes on a writing every day. Maybe that's the thing you're doing for your writing every day. So maybe, you can knock out 2 of those strategies at one time. Maybe the 5 minutes you're spending every day is writing one of those synthesis paragraphs. For me, I don't know that I'm going to use it in that way. I think how I'm going to handle it is every time I start a writing session, I'm going to start with a synthesis paragraph for a while, and I'm going to see how that goes. I think it'll be really cool. I made a little note to show and tell on another episode about how that might look and what generated from that episode. That might be one that's probably better to see on YouTube so you can see the differences. But yeah, other things that are in this rule of fives that I thought were novel. Let's just say that there was just a lot of things I had not thought about. Another good strategy in the rule of fives is spending 5 minutes a day. They say a day. These daily things I know I could not pull off. I could probably not do this a day, but I could do it 3 or 4 times a week. One of the other strategies recommended was to read your writing to somebody for 5 minutes a day. And they said, you can get anybody. It doesn't have to be an academic. It could be, if you have children, grab one of your children. You've got a roommate, tell that person. They said if you have a cat or a dog, tell your pet. And they said the act of reading aloud is a good way. Of course, we can hear when things sound wrong or where we pause because we realize, oh, those two things are not hooked together. I think that's a really good way to help clarify ideas, but also get us more comfortable verbalizing them. Because a lot of the academic work that we do, we're grappling with really tough concepts and trying to figure out how these pieces fit together. This person that wrote the strategy argues that the act of verbalizing is helpful and clarifying, but also if you get a chance to read it to somebody, so let's say maybe you have a writing accountability partner, you get together with somebody 2 mornings a week and you do some writing. Maybe at the end or at the beginning, you each can read 5 minutes of your writing to the other person and let the other person ask questions. And maybe the whole thing, maybe you devote, let's take it, as long as it might go, let's say 20 minutes. Each person gets 5 minutes to read. The other person just listens and asks questions for 5, and then you switch. That would be a really great way to kick off a writing session, because then you have those questions that the other person asked as your launching point into your writing. Now you have something to go on. So I can't recommend that strategy enough. There are so many things in this book. I discover something new every time. So I do talk about books I recommend all the time during the holiday season, because I always say, these are, some of the books that I'm looking to get for, say, summer reading or for holiday reading. But in this case, this is a resource that I know I would repurchase again. And I've talked about this before, with some scholarly writing books and productivity books. Either I'm not a big fan of their tone, or I feel like the advice is generic, because, we've all heard a lot of the same generic advice, especially if you're listening to this podcast. For me, I want something that is practical, that I understand what I need to do, and I can use it immediately. So those are the criteria when I look for this kind of stuff. So this particular book, so far, everything that I've picked in there has been something I could implement that day. So, I can't recommend it enough. I'll put a link in the show notes, and I hope this helped this week. Happy writing.